Welcome into Sports Memo's Betting Podcast, XFL edition with our XFL expert, Robbie Veno. Rob, welcome into the pod. How are you?
I am good today, Drew. How about yourself? How'd you like it?
I liked it, man. I'm telling you, like stock market, am I buying, am I selling? I'm buying the XFL, Robbie. I wouldn't be surprised if it's around for a long, long time. I think it was a good product. I think there was talent there. The stands looked fun. And to tell you the truth, I like the rules. I like the rules more in the XFL than I do in the NFL. How did you feel?
Yeah, no, and I wonder, being as stubborn as the NFL is, if they won't look at some of this and adapt some of the rule changes in their own league. I mean, I didn't see one rule change out there, Drew, that I disliked, whether it be from a fan excitement level or whether it be from a personal player safety issue. Mm-hmm. It seemed like they were all implemented for great reasons, and they all seemed to work. So, I think the NFL will probably have to take a long, hard look, maybe starting with the kickoff, because as strange as that may seem to us to look at, it's effective, mm-hmm. right? It's effective on all ends. It stops really fast collisions. It stops the kicker from getting a full head of steam to kick it through the end zone for a boring touchback, and it gives the return man a chance to return. So I liked everything. It's kind of crazy, the penalty for kicking the ball out of bounds mm-hmm. on a kickoff, where it goes all the way to the opposing 45-yard line, which, don't be kicking it out of bounds too often. Those are short drives. But, no, I liked it. We got to see some sideline interviews filled with expletives. We got a little look into the locker rooms at halftime. And I'll tell you, my favorite of all, Drew, just being a football guy, was that you get to hear the offensive coordinator or the head coach call every play. And then they'll explain to you what the terminology, because the terminology to any of us that haven't played on that level, you don't know. But to hear the play call, to hear it broken down, this is going to be a crossing route, this is going to be a run play to the left, whatever. I thought that was really, really good as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely.
I agree with you. And for the quarterback to hear the offensive coordinator or the quarterback's coach or the head coach in his ear, and also giving him reminders. One thing I noticed, and I used to love that when the head coach would give you a little reminder, like, hey, remember to read that backside safety or what have you. I think that really helps the quarterback, and we saw it, in the offense. Now, sometimes they did stumble, but that happens in college football and the NFL as well. Week one, I've always been of the camp. I look to bet unders week one for that. That defense tends to be ahead of offense early on in the season. And then once the timing gets down, as long as the weather stays good, the offense can kind of move forward. So I did notice that, the rule changes. I've always thought that college football, 1 foot, I like that more. So I like that the XFL did that. Being able to talk to the quarterback and all the skill positions, give them reminders as well. I like that as well. And the kickoffs. I mean, I like the kickoff more. As soon as I saw it, I was like, man, if the NFL doesn't go to that very, very soon, I think they're making the wrong choice there, Robbie. So it sounds like we're in agreement. It being the XFL, it working. I mean, we got a 10-week long season. We'll be doing this each and every Tuesday throughout the season, trying to get ahead of some of these moves, guys, so you can mark it down. Please subscribe to the podcast. And we also do a simulcast video style on YouTube, so check that out as well. And we'll be going down the card here. We got Circa out with lines. We also got Westgate here in Las Vegas. Most sports books, at least the big ones, are out with sides and totals. Now, if you kind of got a guy on the side, maybe your bookie, so to speak, he might not have it on some of the smaller platforms. But overall, Robbie, we can just start at the top here. First one up on Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific kick here, 409-410. New York at D.C. That's Washington, D.C. at home here. -5 in the hook at home, 48 being the total here. Robbie, you interested in betting New York versus D.C.?
Well, I'll break it down a little bit from the point spread perspective, Drew. I mean, when you look at Washington's opening game against Seattle, they win that game 31-19, which looks pretty decisive, but in reality, not all that decisive. For the defenders, they had 2 touchdowns, courtesy of special teams and defense, a blocked punt for a touchdown and an interception return for a touchdown, which, if you minus out 14 points, it becomes a 19-17 Seattle game. And also, we can't forget that Seattle fumbles on a 2nd and goal on the 3-yard line in the fourth quarter with a chance to get into the end zone and close that 31-19 lead up. They actually had made it 31-22 on a field goal, but gave the field goal back because there was a roughing or a running into the kicker call that gave them a first down. They subsequently moved it to the 3-yard line and then fumbled. So Seattle was a little closer to covering that 9-point number than maybe the final score indicates. New York was a wire-to-wire job. Kind of conflicting things with the New York defense, Drew. Remember last week when we talked about them, analyzing them, from everything I had read, the secondary was going to be tremendous. The secondary proved to be real good, as did the defensive front where quarterback pressure is concerned. This team wound up with 8 quarterback hits, 2 sacks, 2 picks, and a fumble recovery. And they stopped Tampa Bay twice in goal-to-goal situations. Tampa Bay, one of the more explosive offenses in the league. So all that makes it sound like New York is an outstanding defense. But the one drawback, Tampa ran the ball real well against this team. 150 rushing yards, 5 per carry. I don't know that it fits Washington's style because Cardale Jones and company actually, after 1 week of the XFL, lead the league in yards per pass play. They like to go downfield with it. Maybe they have to switch and run the ball a little bit this week because I think that the New York defense, their strength matches up nice with the Washington's offensive strength. Washington can go to the ground a little bit here and maybe attack New York's run defense, which was porous. I tell you, New York's offense didn't really impress me at all last week. Matt McGloin, quarterback, they did win 23-3, but they were outgained by Tampa massively in that game. The exact numbers, Drew, as I look here, were 394 to 226. It's a 170-yard gap to a team that lost by 20 points. So obviously Tampa moved the football, couldn't score. I think that Washington, D.C., if they can run it a little here, maybe change their colors somewhat, they might be able to cover that number against New York.
Robbie, great breakdown. I agree with a lot of what you had to say there, and it kind of segues into our next game, the afternoon game, 2 o'clock Pacific kick on Saturday. 4-11, 4-12 here, Tampa Bay at Seattle. We're seeing Seattle, the home dog here, plus 2.5, 46 being the total. And you bring up Tampa Bay not being able to score. That's one thing I brought away as well. But their offense did look pretty good, and they're going up against Seattle here, which, I'm not a big futures bettor, but coming into week 2, Seattle is, at least by the odds makers' futures numbers, the lowest power-rated team in the XFL. I think they're plus 1,600 to win the XFL. I'm not so sure I agree with that, Robbie. I think Seattle, obviously lost the game. I'm not saying they're the best, but their quarterback room, I think, is underrated. And, with Silvers, and also the backups very good as well from USF. I think that Seattle might be a buy on here. As a home dog, we haven't seen a lot of that in the XFL so far, but I'm looking towards Seattle. Tampa Bay is very talented as well, though, Robbie. I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, these two teams lost to the two teams we just discussed, right? New York beat Tampa Bay. Washington beat Seattle. And as I mentioned in both, maybe the final scores are not as decisive as the games themselves were. I thought Seattle played real well offensively, Drew. I thought Jim Zorn's play calling was very good for Seattle. Like I say, it's a couple of mistakes by the punt team, which obviously can be corrected. I mean, block punts don't happen every week. I'm sure they'll go to work on special teams and close up that if you're not giving up a block punt for a touchdown. And at the end, when they were chasing, Brandon Silvers threw a pick 6 on a play where his receiver, I think it was Austin Prohl, fell down on the route and made it an easy pick for a touchdown. So that's 14. Like I say, that game could have been a lot different. Seattle certainly had every opportunity to cover what was a big number. So I think both of these teams are a hair bit underrated as we go into the week. Now, what I did, Drew, is, I started with some basic power ratings and then adjusted after I saw week 1. In this particular game, I made the Tampa Bay side only a 0.5 point favorite on the road. They come 2.5, so maybe they're a little strong here. But they, too, like we just said, move the football against New York, especially on the ground. Seattle's defensive front was tough against Washington, so that's going to Washington, D.C., excuse me. That's going to be an interesting matchup. Tampa Bay running the football, Seattle's front seven. And I'm not so sure Aaron Murray, from what I'm reading, is going to hold on to his quarterback's job here for Tampa. There may be a little controversy over. We've seen a coordinator get fired already in this league.
Yeah.
We may see our first quarterback switch this week. But for me, this is a game to look at a little deeper. But I do think both of these teams, I wish they weren't playing each other, because I probably would have bet both this week, thinking that they're kind of misread by the public after 1 week of football.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I looked at the week 2 schedule and I had both of these two teams circled as bet on, Robbie. I'm kind of a little bit upset that they're playing each other, as a lot of sports bettors out there know that feeling. But heck, it does happen. Guys, coupon code for this podcast, we got DM999 for 1 year all access at sportsmemo.com. You can get Robbie Veno's next 365 days, all the plays he releases in every sport, for $1,000 off using this coupon code. You can use it for Drew Martin, Dr. Chuck, Teddy Covers, whoever you would like. Less than $1,000. 1 year all access that will give you every play in every sport for 1 year. $1,000 off. Coupon code DM999 at checkout. Robbie, let's move on to Sunday's slate here. Early kick here, 12 o'clock Pacific. We got Dallas at Los Angeles. Looks like Dallas -4. Total of 48.5 here.
Yeah, and here we'll see, Dallas loses straight up at home as a 9.5, as the largest favorite of week 1 to St. Louis. Played with a backup quarterback, Philip Nelson. Kid played at Minnesota, and then I think Philip Nelson went to East Carolina, somewhere he transferred to. Yeah,
he's pretty good.
And wasn't very effective last week. They're going to get Landry Jones back here this week for Dallas, so it's hard to grade this, Drew. Just from a power ratings perspective, off of what we saw last week, this number would come Dallas on the road -0.5. They're -4.5. I think that 4 accounts for Landry Jones. And if you put the starting quarterback into Hal Mummy's air raid offense, maybe it runs a little bit smoother than it did last week. It's really difficult in week 2 to tell if one team was really good at something or if one team was just that bad at something that made the other side look good. So we got to be careful of that as well. But I think Landry Jones obviously increases Dallas's capabilities on offense. For LA, we just talked about, their defensive coordinator, Pepper Johnson, gets fired after 1 week, giving up 37 points to the Houston Roughnecks. But you know what, Drew? Their offensive line was absolutely miserable. They play Houston last week, and the Houston defense leads the entire league in week 1 with 16 hits on the quarterback. So the defensive coordinator gets fired, but the offensive line played miserably in that game for the LA side. That'll be interesting, because in watching that St. Louis Dallas game, the two defenses were, pretty much the better units on the field. It was a 15-9 final. Dallas's defense may be able to dominate that Los Angeles offensive line again. If that's the case, despite what my power ratings are telling me, I think Dallas would be the correct side at this price. It's a talented team, like I say, that went without their starting quarterback in week 1. But if Landry Jones walks right in and starts lighting things up, LA was picked apart by Houston in that air raid. Nothing to say they can't be picked apart by Landry Jones and his air raid. The other side, Houston run and shoot, Dallas air raid. But I do think Dallas probably the right side there if everything goes according to what we saw last week.
All right. Follow him on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. Also on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. Guys, feel free throughout the week to shoot us over any questions you got, anything you want answered on the XFL podcast each and every Tuesday here, sportsmemo.com, podcast form, wherever you're downloading your podcast. Also, simulcast on the YouTube channel. Check us out on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports, on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. We got last game here, Robbie. Just 4 games. That's the way the XFL works, man. 8 teams, actually 9 teams, right, Robbie? You got that?
Yeah.
That extra
Team 9.
Yeah, Team 9. And is that being utilized at all this week?
There are a couple injury situations, Drew. If we just backtrack Seattle, for those who were listening to us analyze the Tampa Bay Seattle game, Seattle, the entire left side of their starting offensive line, questionable this week, left tackle and left guard. So maybe Seattle will have to dip into the Team 9 pool for a couple of offensive linemen, maybe only one, maybe none. But right now there are question marks next to both the starting left tackle and left guard for Seattle.
Okay. We got last game here, Robbie, 415, 416, St. Louis, +8 on the road at Houston. Total of 50, Robbie.
Well, people love offense and people love what they saw last. So no surprise that Houston, from the time you sent me these numbers, Drew, Houston was 7.5 and now up to 8. I could understand, they scored 37 points, exciting football team. But St. Louis, boy, they held their ground against that Dallas team, which has a very talented offense and a gimmicky offense as well, right? Air raid for Dallas, run and shoot, they'll see here. St. Louis used the old, run first offense, play solid defense approach, and it worked. They ran the ball 42 times in week 1 for 191 yards. So it wasn't like they were just running into the line of scrimmage. They gained yardage, average 4.5 per pop, ran it 59% of the time in that game. And they'll probably challenge Houston's defense here as well with the run game. Jordan Ta'amu, to me, Drew, a guy that we both know from Ole Miss and remember well, in my case, fondly at times, whether it be for side or total. But he played pretty good, in my estimation. Towards the end of that game, they started to utilize his legs and allow him to run and become the dual threat that he can be. So for St. Louis, I think they're probably underrated one more time here, Drew. 7.5, now 8. Seems like a lot. I made the number 6.5. The one question mark I would have with the St. Louis defense in this game is, despite the fact that they held Dallas to only 9 points, they did give up 34 of 43, 79% completions, but they were all tiny completions. Dallas barely averaged 5 yards per completion. So Houston's run and shoot, gets it out quick, generally short passes. There are some long passes mixed in, but St. Louis tackles. They don't let that guy in space get away. At least they didn't in week 1, which could be to their advantage here. 51.5, not real sure on that total. I think that's mostly up there because of Houston's explosion in week 1. But we may find out, Drew, that LA's defense was just that bad that Houston could exploit it. And I don't know that their quarterback, Jordan Ta'amu, is going to get hit 16 times the way LA's did by Houston, but it's another good matchup to watch. The Houston defensive front was really, really good in week 1. I think 7.5 might be a few too many, though.
All right, Rob Veno. Rob, just follow-up question here. What are your thoughts just overall in the XFL and betting the totals? Are you more inclined to go over? Are you more inclined to go under just after week 1, watching the 4 games? What are your overall thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's crazy, Drew, because you really are, where we take the extra point for granted. A guy's going to kick it right through the uprights. You're going to get 7 every touchdown. Here, we can't take it for granted. More often than not, I'll see if I can get you the exact numbers here, Drew, because I have them. But the conversions were not overly successful in week 1. And that's going to be a problem going forward if, in fact, you're betting totals and you're only getting 6 the majority of the time. You really want to get more than 6 because you're always, as explosive as the Houston-LA game was, it barely got over the number, 54. Just right. It's the only over of the weekend, and I think the number was 51 or 52 in that game. As far as conversions go, in week 1, where the heck are my numbers here now?
I will say this, Robbie. In the XFL, the maximum bet allowed on a total, at least this week, is only $500, like pretty much all across Vegas. And that's pretty telling in terms of, it's understandable. The odds makers don't want to take a lot of money on these totals, really on the sides either, until they get more numbers behind them and they feel more confident in their number. That's why I think it's a really beatable sport, especially early on.
Yeah, and like we said last week, Drew, when we were giving some advice towards totals, key numbers, forget about them. There, you see the way these games land. There's no key numbers out there in XFL. These teams all combined last week when it came to point after touchdown. They were 7 of 19. Now, 7 of 19 is 37% of the time they were successful. And remember, a lot of those are still only 1-point conversions. You're not getting – everybody's not going for 2 or 3. So touchdowns being worth 6 instead of 7 are really something to look at when you're betting these totals because you're not getting – I mean, you start scoring a few touchdowns and those accumulate. when you don't make those things. 3 touchdowns, you lose 3 points. That'll cost you a total any day of the week. So it'll be interesting, Drew, to watch and see if maybe that's just a product of week 1, if maybe conversion plays get a little more creative starting now. It's hard to really give a blanket statement. I'm with you. I love to play totals much more than I like to play sides. But in this league, they're making it a little bit difficult in the beginning. We have to feel our way through this.
All right. Robbie Veno on Twitter, at Rob Veno Sports. I'm on Twitter, at Drew Martin Bets. Guys, feel free to throw any questions at us on Twitter. We'll answer them on next week's podcast, Tuesday, XFL. It will be here each and every Tuesday. Robbie, did you want to throw anything else out before we shut this down?
You know what? Anybody who didn't watch it last week that's watching this video Drew and I are doing right now, give yourself a few minutes. Just give it a shot, because I really think, the folks, once you see it, you'll probably enjoy it. And I think it's, you and I were talking, Drew, I think it's going to last. They've got the financial end of it covered. They won't run out of money for players' paychecks. And being on the big networks that they are, they get a lot of exposure. And it is fun to listen to these announcers. Real quick, something we didn't hit on. Actually talk about the spread during the game. I mean, when Seattle kicked that field goal to make it 31-22, the game's over the total. Then they took it down because they accepted the penalty. Oh, wait a minute, that game's not over the total. So to hear that type of jargon mixed in with the game, which we generally have not heard in football, is kind of fun as well. These announcers are well aware, well prepped of the point spreads and the totals before they get behind the mics.
Yeah, it's a big plus as well. I'm with you, Robbie. And as far as it making it, I think it will. But I was talking to a sportsbook director here in town, and he brought up the fact, but March Madness is what they're going to have to go up against. And it's going to take a backseat to what March Madness is. So it's just, can they make it through that for those, 4 weeks, Robbie?
Yeah, because conference tournaments are going to be here before you know it, Drew. And, of course, the power conference tournaments add an extra week and a half to that, 4-week-long March Madness, NIT, stuff that people really bet heavily. So it's true, in a 10-week season, and I had mentioned this, I forgot to say it on the show here, so I'm glad you brought it up. I was having a conversation myself where I brought that up. When you're going to lose 5 weeks out of your 10, the audience will be tuning in somewhere else, especially on Saturday and Sunday when this league is played. That is going to be a bit difficult. So we'll see. I know myself, if you have money on it, you're going to catch it one way or the other. You have 4 or 5 TVs, computer screens in front of you. You're watching everything. But it will be interesting to see what their ratings are when that time of year comes. And it's coming pretty quick.
He's Robbie Veno. His NBA current season, 104-75. That's 58%, up 70% ROI. Really killing it in NBA. And also, since 2016, guys, in the playoffs, he's at 62%. That's 72-44. Check him out, sportsmemo.com. Killing the NBA. Going to start throwing out some XFL. He's a good guy to check out for the 1 year all-access discount here. Coupon code DM999 at checkout takes $1,000 off. Any handicapper, sportsmemo.com. Great deal, guys. Available for the next 24 hours. Robbie Veno, thanks for the time. We'll talk next Tuesday. Guys, best of luck with your bets.